Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. We are back on Battlesnake Official. Today, we are very excited to welcome Marianne Bulger of Prospect .fyi and Kathryn Christie of Georgian Partners, and they're going to be talking about how to land your next role remotely during COVID-19. And I think this is a very applicable and sort of poignant topic that a lot of people are going to be interested in. So we're really excited to have them join us and sort of give us the insights and the what how of running your next sort of job search remotely.
Thank you, Noah. Wow, what an amazing day it is. It's Friday. I know we're all stuck inside, but it's Friday, so it's worth celebrating. I'm Marianne Bulger. I'm the CEO and founder of Prospect, which is the organization that Noah spoke about before. We are Canada's largest startup career hub. We are also the creators of the Help List. The Help List is a hub for job seekers and companies, but specifically for job seekers during COVID to help find opportunities that might, if they've been affected by, if their employment status has been affected. So you can actually add your name to a list on the Help List if you're looking for work and be actively recruited by tech companies across Canada who are hiring at the moment. But that is enough about me. I'm really, really excited to be sitting here virtual fireside with Kathryn Christie from Georgian Partners. Kathryn, please introduce yourself. What do you do for work? What is Georgian Partners?
Yes. Hello, everybody. It's so great to be here. Just echoing Marianne. It's an awesome day, and what a great initiative with Stay Home and Code. So we're super excited to chat with you all today. My role is the Director of Talent at Georgian Partners. And Georgian Partners is a growth equity venture capital firm based out of Toronto that invests in tech companies that are disrupting different areas of technology. The main areas that we focus on are AI, conversational AI, and then trust, which is an evolution of cybersecurity. So lots of really amazing organizations that we get to work with. And my absolute honor in my role is getting to help drive talent and engagement internally at Georgian. We have a team of about 55 folks now. And then I get to spend about half my time partnering with all of our wonderful portfolio companies and other companies in the ecosystem to help them with their talent strategies.
Amazing. So let's sink into that a bit more before we skip over it. For a lot of people who might be tuning in today or listening to this live stream later, they're kind of wondering, like, what does a VC have to do with who gets hired at a company? I'd love for you to share, and perhaps I'll add some thoughts as well, like share a bit more about what the role that Georgian plays in supporting your portfolio companies in helping to hire talent.
Mm-hmm. So what's really fascinating from a VC perspective, especially at Georgian, is that a lot of the emphasis that we put on our partnerships with these great companies is actually has nothing to do with capital. So we are a venture capital firm, and we do help companies grow and hit their really exciting growth targets with capital. But the main emphasis that we put on is how else we help. And the really neat area that all of them are excited to get help in is hiring. So we all know that it can be really challenging, and there's a lot of noise out there. And they have really aggressive growth targets to hit, and they really need a lot of great people quickly. So what VCs do, and my role and similar roles at other organizations, is that we provide access to resources, we provide advisory help. We actually sometimes are on the front lines helping to recruit, interviewing candidates, depending on what roles there are. And really supporting the recruitment teams and the overall talent teams in the portfolio to help them find really great people quickly.
Nice. That's so helpful, because I also worked, as Kathryn knows, but for everyone who's tuning in, I also worked in venture capital prior to working full-time on Prospect. And I had no idea before how much of a role a venture capital firm can, or a PE firm can play in helping to build core teams. And so one thing I wanted to share with everyone who's tuning in is if you do know someone who works in VC and you're job seeking right now, it doesn't hurt to reach out to that person and let them know that you're looking, because chances are they might actually have a company in their portfolio that they can refer you to. That's one of the really like simple, direct ways in which you can tap into the benefit of VC, how VCs help build companies. So I think let's go first and talk about hiring patterns during COVID. Your lens, and the reason why I think that the VC perspective is so interesting is that you're not just representing one company that might be hiring, but you have been seeing what's happening across your portfolio in terms of how companies are changing, whether they're hiring, what formats they're hiring in. So I'm curious what you're learning from your companies about how they're making hiring decisions during this crisis.
It's been so fascinating to be in this role and see that. And there's sort of, it's odd using optimistic words in these times, but there has been some sort of positivity that I've seen come out of it. The two things that I've seen really stand out from a hiring perspective are one, just focusing on humans and refocusing on humans. I think we, especially in talent, sometimes we can get caught up in the process and the programs and the ROI statements and all that great stuff, the budgets. But the refocus on just people and making it a human experience has been super refreshing from a talent perspective. And then the other side that I've really seen come up more and more is just prioritizing and refocusing on what's really important to the organization and what's really important to driving the organization forward in these times. Some industries have seen tailwinds just serendipitously, and many others haven't. But the focus has really been on, okay, what roles and what people do we need to prioritize to keep us moving forward and we've been talking a lot about sort of the new normal and saying, normal doesn't exist anymore, and that's a good thing. But how do we find ways to thrive and prioritize the roles and the skill sets that will help us thrive in these times?
Interesting. Are there any key priorities in there that you think would be relevant for job seekers to know, for someone that might be looking for their opportunity? Is there any common thread that you're seeing in the companies, in the types of talent they're seeking or whatnot?
Definitely. One thing that I'm seeing loud and clear is way more emphasis on values alignment. And I would say that, and I know we'll get into sort of the job seeker side of it as well, but I think more so now than ever, it's really important to identify values alignment for candidates themselves to really believe that they're joining an organization that they align with, but also for the organization. We don't have the luxury anymore of bringing someone into a culture in person, at least for the foreseeable future, and getting them sort of bought into the values. I think it's much more important now that we find that values alignment right off the bat during the hiring process. And then obviously just a huge emphasis on technical talent and being able to pivot and adjust product roadmaps quickly and get products and features out faster than before. And just being able to bring on people who are agile and able to adjust that way with that technical background.
I love that. I'm actually going to skip ahead. I have a list of questions here. It's not just off the cuff, but Kathryn and I were sort of chatting about it before. And I think on the point of values, that's super important. It's no longer just about your grades in school. It is about who you are as a person. And that's something that, for some people who are hearing this right now, that might be music to their ears. And for others who might be used to relying on their technical skills as sort of what speaks for their work, how can job seekers better articulate their values so that it is really clear and interesting and exciting for companies that might be hiring? Do they put it at the top of their resume? Do they put it on their LinkedIn? Maybe I'm giving it all away. Go for it.
Yes, all of the above, I would say. But honestly, I think step one, I do probably conservatively, we'll say 20 to 40 interviews a month. And I ask everybody, what are your values? What's important to you? And genuinely, at least half of them just don't know, or they don't know how to describe it, or they're just surprised by that question. So I think the most important thing is really taking some time to figure out what's important to you and what's a non-negotiable. And I think that's the easiest question to answer first is, what's a non-negotiable at an organization for you to join? And then sort of go from there. You don't have to say, these are my 5 values and 3 sub-bullets for each of them, but at least being able to articulate, this is what's most important to me, and this is what I will not sacrifice to join an organization. That, to me, immediately puts a candidate to the top of the pool, because I know, 1, that they care about this, and then 2, they actually have taken the time to describe it. So yes, put it everywhere. Shout it from the rooftops.
And if someone was to, right after this session, go and do the homework of trying to define their values, I can see how values and perks, work perks, can get confusing. What would you say is the difference between the two? And then maybe you and I can rhyme off a few, what we think are values and what we think are perks.
Yes. The easy one, perks to me are sort of things that an organization gives you in kind, I guess, for your service to the organization. So it's almost like a transactional exchange. So for your work, you're compensated, you're provided benefits, you're provided whatever that looks like. And to me, that's the perk mindset. Whereas values, I like to describe values as how you make decisions. So every decision you make is a trade-off. You're deciding to do something and not do something else, or not do a select few things or a large amount of things. And in those decision moments, that's when we activate our values. And that's how I like to think about it, as opposed to, this is our big guiding vision statements and it's all great and this is what we write on the wall. But day to day, internally and at an organization, how you make decisions and what trade-offs you make really define those values.
What are some of the values that Georgian Partners uses as a team?
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest one, and this is the one that we look for in our portfolio as well, and in a lot of VC-backed type of organizations, is a really important value, is having a long-term view. So we call it long-term view, but really what that means is understanding that decisions we make now have a massive impact on what happens in the future, and never taking that for granted for a short-term gain. So really keeping that long-term focus, even when it's often much easier to make a decision that will give us that short-term gain, focusing on how that's going to impact us in the future. And I think that's so important in a startup environment, because there is so much unknown, but it's critical to keep that long-term sort of thinking on the horizon in those moments where, okay, we could make this quick fix or cut this corner to get something out faster, but what does that mean, down the road for the roadmap or whatever it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The one that comes to mind that's so important for me and so hard for us as humans to face is diversity of opinion.
Yes.
It's so easy to say that you want to hear from all sorts of diverse thought leaders, but it's really hard when someone disagrees with what what you're saying in the workplace and what you believe in. And creating space for diverse thought and space for healthy disagreements is one of my favorite values, and understanding how companies do that is important. On that, I'm going to reverse a little bit, because we started to talk about it. For someone who's job hunting right now, what what do we think is sort of the same as status quo as before, like the same things you should do as a job seeker to prepare for it to apply? And what are some of the things that we think are different in this moment that maybe job seekers need to adapt to? I'll let you take the lead and then I'll throw some thoughts out there.
For sure. I think that the stuff that's not going to change that recruiting folks look for always is, being prepared, being articulate, doing your homework, understanding how to articulate your skills and your background, sharing why you're interested about the organization, showing that you actually care to join that organization, and the sort of table stakes work around, having a great online presence and making sure everything looks great and you're able to sort of showcase yourself and your skills virtually. The stuff that I'm finding really fascinating that's changing is this. It's similar to, and I use the analogy of a long distance relationship, sorry. But you have to learn how to over communicate. So we don't have the luxury anymore of you spending a day in the office with folks. We don't have the luxury of you meeting our receptionist. So that's my number one sort of bar for a candidate is I always ask the receptionist if they asked her name and chatted with her, asked her about her day. Little things like that give you so much information about a person that we just can't do right now. So that piece I'm finding is so important as a job seeker to over communicate who you are, because you can't truly show it like we would in a face-to-face environment.
Yeah, I love that. It inspires thoughts. Like if I was looking for a role right now, reaching out to the company in advance, even reaching out to check in with them to see if they are still hiring. Because right now, and we can talk about this till ends, but right now it's hard to know that if a job description is posted, whether or not it still is a real job description because of COVID. Maybe even reaching out to employees of that organization and just saying, hey, if you have a couple minutes, I would love if you could answer some questions for me. It looks like you work for this company. I'm really curious about it. And to your point, over communicating, almost seeming over enthusiastic for, the role. It might seem like an extreme to go to all these ends online. I think you and I talked about this a few weeks ago. We were just having a coffee chat and we spoke about even thinking about sending a video along with your cover letter and your resume and your application, setting a video link that is a statement of expression of your interest in the company and can really show, your personality in that environment, and not just saying, hey, I'm Marianne and I'm good at these skills, but also this is who I am as a person. These are the hobbies I get up to in quarantine, and this is how I'm structuring my day. And here's my cat. I don't know. That would resonate with me.
Totally. Yeah, I completely agree. And it's so neat to think about this whole sort of meeting people this way in a virtual setting. And there's one side of it where you feel like you're not connecting as well as you would in person, but then there's the other side of, we're in my living room. Like this is actually a little bit more intimate than it might be at the office, and giving yourself the freedom to sort of let those walls down and say, oh, here's my cat, here, whatever. And just be that human person that they want to work with and they want to be side by side with in the office or virtually.
Yeah, that's great. I think that the other piece that I actually drive this point home, whether it's COVID or not, it's really important to represent yourself online and to put the effort in. It might be scary to update your LinkedIn photo and brag about yourself in LinkedIn, but as I'm sure you would agree, LinkedIn has become like a huge source and a very powerful source for how recruiters, whether they're in-house hiring managers or other recruiters, are reviewing your candidacy. So after you submit your resume, the first thing someone's going to do is Google your name and say, who is this person? I want to know more. And if, you also should Google your name and make sure that is appropriate. And the other thing is there's two things I would say. One, update your LinkedIn, not just job titles, but describe what you did at that job. Describe the skills you learned, the technical skills or soft skills, whatever that might be. If you contributed to a major accomplishment within a past organization and there's some kind of press about it, add those links to those to those descriptions in LinkedIn. And then the other thing I always tell people is if you haven't bought your own domain name yet and created a little microsite about yourself and you feel like you want to do that, it's a really wonderful way to look beyond the confines of LinkedIn to really express who you are and share your portfolio. Do you have any other tips, digital storytelling tips to add?
Yeah, I love the Googling one. I actually used to teach a course to first year students at university, and it was like literally day one, first session was everybody get your phones out and Google yourself and let's talk about what's there. There's a lot of hilarious stuff that's going to come up. I have a violinist who's quite famous, who has the same name as me. So it's kind of nice because she's great and squeaky clean. So that comes up for the first 3 pages if you Google me. But there's some pretty a blog from when I was 16 and things like that you just sometimes forget. So absolutely Google yourself. And the more positive things you can put online that associate with your name, the better that first page is going to look on Google. So making a microsite, I love that. And then, your social media presence is so important. Every background check company now does a social media check. It used to be something that recruiters might do if they had an inclination that something might be off, but now it's table stakes. So no matter what your aliases are, all that, it's going to come through.
Yeah, there's I have to say this, and I've said it before, that bar shot from 2008 where you looked super cute, it is not cute as your LinkedIn profile photo. It never is. No. And I'm saying this because we actually had a founder within the portfolio at Golden whose shot was a cropped, cute selfie. And I personally went to their office and took headshots of their founding team in order to update that. This was after the investment, but a few things. If you really need a new headshot, you don't need to pay a photographer, nor can you right now. If you have portrait mode on your phone, you can literally go outside and have, if you're quarantined with someone, have them take the shot for you. If not, build a stack of books, stand in front of a tree or a bush and take a portrait mode shot. But that's my hack tip to getting a better headshot. The other thing you can do, the other thing you should do is ask someone else whether or not they think that this photo is a good representation of who you are and who you are as a person. Because we always personally, we lean towards photos that we think are make us look good. But what we really want to do is represent ourselves as who we are, let our personalities shine through and have someone else really push you on that and tell you what they think. Because I think that that's really, really an important piece of this.
I love that. I love that sort of letting your personality shine through. I say that a lot to people when I review their resumes. I couldn't be more sick of reading resumes where it says responsible for this, responsible for that. I want to hear you say, I love this. And I was so proud of this. And this is my passion. And all, especially now when there are a lot of job seekers out there, and I can't tell you how many resumes I get that just all read exactly the same. And I don't get any personality from people. And I know we were all coached by career centers at our schools to follow a template and boo, no more. Tell the story of who you are. Tell me why you're looking for a job right now. Tell me, what's been hard and what's been exciting and what you're looking for and all that stuff that I'm going to ask you in our interview. The sooner I see that, the easier it is for us to get into a really great conversation.
Yeah, I love that. My resume, I've shared the template with so many people, but the most prominent section, they're all the same size, but the most prominent, it's right in the center. I have work, play, and school, and play is right in the middle. And it's all the things I like to do when I'm not going to do the job that you're going to pay me to do. It's who I am as a person. It's my dog, Patsy Cline, my love of playing Settlers of Catan, biking and stuff like that. And to your point, and coming back to sort of this theme that you mentioned about hiring patterns in COVID and getting back to the human, I see a question here, which I think we'll address later, about like leaning into remote work. I think it means more than ever, companies who are leaning into remote work want to make sure that they're humans and they're going to do everything they can to vet that even more at a distance. Continuing on this thread, I want to talk about some of the unique interview tactics that you might be hearing from your companies. So for anyone who is looking for work right now, they're probably wondering, is this any different than a job from like that I would interview for in person? Are there any cool trends you're seeing or interesting things people should know about?
I think the one sort of overarching piece of advice I would provide is patience. I think I'll use just one word, just patience, and maybe two words, sorry, patience and empathy. So understanding that these companies are going through a really hard time, just like you are, and empathizing with these recruiters that are getting bombarded, and they're not just a bot asking you questions on the other side. They're also living in a global pandemic, and they might be having a rough day. And showing your human side, there's nothing I love more than just starting an interview and someone saying, "How are you holding up? Like this is wild," as opposed to, "Okay, I'm ready for my first question." So being empathizing and knowing and having that human connection that we're all in this together. And then with the other patterns, definitely more touch points. So trying to find more ways. I've seen the companies that I'm most proud of with what they're doing with their recruitment is they're offering up the opportunity to meet more people at the organization virtually, as opposed to, when you're in the office, you'll bump into someone, "Oh, this is one of our partners, X name, whatever, a quick hello." Because we don't have that, we're seeing companies say, "Okay, here are sort of 5 people that can really give you a good idea of what it's like here, and we'll set coffees up for you to have with them." So be ready for more touch points. And I think it's really important as a job seeker to take advantage of those touch points, as opposed to sort of, "Oh God, I have another call." It's really, this is important to understand the culture.
What if a company doesn't offer that touch point? Do you think the job seeker should ask for that?
Absolutely. It's such a two-way street, and it's so important that you choose the company just as much as they choose you. And it's hard in these moments when a lot of people are looking for jobs without a job. So you're a bit more excited to just get something and start, but taking the time to really understand the people and the company is just as important as them trying to understand you. So I would always ask for as many touch points. I would ask to have a call with the receptionist genuinely, or the office coordinator, or whomever sort of really runs the place in the back end, and ask them what it's like every day and how people interact.
Yeah, you're touching on something that's important. So if you are, interviewing and it is offered to you to have a touch point, or you ask for one, ask to have a touch point with someone you might work with. And then also like on a team with, to better understand that team. And then also ask to talk to someone who does something completely different from what you do, to understand what the organization looks like at a distance or the team might look like at a distance. Before, that's sort of the last thing I want, we're getting into this amazing theme of like, this isn't just like, we haven't flipped this talent market on its head. You still have a choice as a job seeker. I'm curious though, before we jump right into that, we're talking about, connecting with other employees at these organizations. Do you have any suggestions of questions to ask them other than what kinds of things are in the snack drawer at the office? What if maybe if I was to, yeah, exactly. Is there a beer tap? What are some of the questions you might ask if you were put in a job seeker's shoes of someone they might work with? That's a valuable data point.
Mm-hmm. My favorite question. It's so simple, but it's just, what do you love about your job? It's everybody loves talking about what's great, and it's always a nice way to start the conversation. And I would also ask every recruiter you talk to, every hiring manager, the more data points you get on that too, you'll start seeing if there's consistency in the culture or if it's inconsistent. And that's a huge telling point for you as a job seeker. And then what's something that you are working on this year to improve your team or the organization or yourself, to me is a really great tell as a seeker and as somebody who's sharing information, for understanding that it's not all rosy and every organization has its challenges. And if people don't know what those are, or they say, oh, no, nothing, everything's great, that's a massive red flag for me. So making sure you're asking what they love, and then some of the hard stuff. So is it, information flow? Yeah. Are you decision making? Is it a bit centralized? Whatever that is, hearing it is awesome, and people knowing what the challenges are, I think is really important.
Yeah, I would say similarly, asking them to compare this experience with a past experience, so that they can start to express what those identifiers are of why this company and why this team. Mm-hmm. And even asking, what is this team or what is this company working on? What are some of the things you've identified, that same way that an interviewer can ask you, like, what are your weak points and what are you working on? Like, you should be able to ask that of the company and understand what it is that they might be struggling with. And also areas, like, they might say, we're really, weak in this one area, and it might be something that you're awesome at, which means that the next time you have a follow-up interview, you can use that data point to speak to how you can contribute to filling that gap. So back to where we were landing, which is at the end of all of this, like, amidst COVID, you don't need to sacrifice yourself and your well-being in choosing the right company. You deserve to find the right company to work for. So I'm curious, how can a candidate ensure that they're getting a good understanding of a company culture while interviewing remotely?
The over communicating piece, I think, is so critical. And being willing to ask questions that the other folks might not be prepared to answer, or they might feel as a bit forward. I think we don't, like I said, we don't have the luxury of just seeing that happen in an organization as an interviewee. So being willing to say, how are decisions made here? Who makes the decision and why? And how does information flow? Is it easy to get access to resources that you need to get your job done? If not, what are some of the roadblocks? And getting into the intricacies of how to get work done and how to do it in the way that the culture works, I think is so critical when you don't see it, especially from a technical perspective. Often you'll do some sort of coding interview, or you'll do a side-by-side with somebody who works there. And it's a really great insight into how they think and how the team collaborates. And that might be a little different, even if you're sharing a whiteboard. It's just different when you're not in a room with them doing it. So make sure you ask, if you're working on a project with 3 people, how do you collaborate? What does that look like? And really getting deeper than you would usually when you're picking up a lot of cues visually and sort of by osmosis by being in the office.
Yeah. Another tip I would add, I love all of that. It's so good. Another tip I would add is research the company before you apply, but also research before you go into the interview. Check out Glassdoor. Every time you're about to, evaluate a company or perhaps interview with a company, check out Glassdoor. Mind you, there's sometimes just really disgruntled employees, former employees, that really exaggerate things. But often, if you really do your research on Glassdoor and on other sort of feedback sources, you can come really prepared with some of the weak points that they might already know about, and you can ask more targeted questions. And this applies for Glassdoor for former or current employee reviews. It also applies for customer reviews. If there's some space that you can see comments on their product or on the product that you might be helping to build, go and find out that feedback, or ask that. If you can't find it, make sure to ask that question explicitly in the interview, because it'll be really interesting to learn what customers think about that company and where they might need improvement.
I love the Glassdoor one too. I would ask them. I would say, hey, I read through your Glassdoor. There was a bit of a theme around this. What are you guys doing about that? And even just challenging them to say, yes, we know about it, we care about it, and here's how we're trying to improve. Awesome.
Yeah, and the last, we're going to get into this question about remote work, but these, it is really, really important to lay out what it is, that you're looking for in the company, and make sure that that is communicated directly back to you. Don't make any assumptions that this is always going to be a remote work position. The other thing I would do, if you're trying to vet the company, go on your LinkedIn, look at the company, see if there's any common connections of people who either work there now or maybe worked there before. Maybe there's a first connection, maybe there's a second connection, but if you can speak to someone who works there or has worked there that you are already connected to prior to the interview, it'll prepare you even more to apply for that job and actually be successful. I'm looking at the time, and what I'd love to do is just open it up for questions now. I do see a couple questions here in the chat. The first one is from, I'm going to say it's Twoten, but I'm probably saying it wrong. The question is, do you see different recruitment trends across different areas of Canada? And I'm sure that this is, let's think about this in the lens of COVID. Are we seeing different recruitment trends happening, or is it sort of the same across the board?
I would say it's the same. It's pretty consistent. The only thing at more of a macro level is that companies are becoming a lot more flexible about where, my dog's saying hi. Here's the dog. People are being a lot more flexible about where people are located. So as opposed to posting a job in Toronto, people are posting a job that could be from anywhere across the country. So there's more flexibility in the regionality around it, but aside from that, quite consistent across the country.
Great point. And here's another follow-up question. If I am in Edmonton, Alberta, and there is a job available in Montreal, Canada, listed as it's in Montreal, Canada, should I avoid applying for that job right now, or do you think location matters?
I don't think so. I don't think it ever should. I mean, we at Georgian, we always take the approach that if the person's amazing, we'll figure it out, if that's remote or if they move or whatever that looks like. And I think a lot of companies are getting more comfortable with that now, particularly because of COVID. So I would say absolutely apply, but write to them about it and say, hey, I know I'm not in Montreal. Here's how here's how I thrive. I'm used to working remotely, whatever that looks like, share it at the top of your resume or however the application looks. My favorite thing is when people are just really open about that and say, hey, I live here, but here's sort of my plan for the next 5 years, blah, blah, blah. And then I know, okay, great, let's get on the phone and we can talk through it.
Great. So the big lesson there is, do not assume that if the location of the job is not where you are geographically located, that you shouldn't apply. Location is almost irrelevant at this point, which is a really beautiful opportunity to test out remote work with a company, whether that's in Canada or globally, preferably in Canada. But if you want to try working for a company anywhere, like the world is your oyster. Noah just flagged to me. There was an early question that came in that was, I am curious to know if you have seen any exciting startup companies emerging right now, or maybe I'm going to add to that question. Are there any companies that are thriving in this environment that job seekers should be watching out for?
Definitely. So it's interesting. It's this odd cognitive dissonance. I've been talking with a couple of our founders who have been thriving, and it's odd, but they're happy that they can help in certain ways. Ed tech is a big one. Immediately, every single teacher, professor, trainer, it had to figure out how to do it remotely. So it's been really fascinating to see how ed tech is adapting to that and evolving and really thriving. other things like digitization tools around retail, delivery optimization software. We have a company that does that. So some areas just sort of by chance.
You got a
name drop? Yes. Top Hat?
Yeah, name drop some of the awesome companies in the portfolio. Yeah. Top Hat.
Top Hat is doing great and lots of open roles. Shipwell is actually in the US, but they are all about remote work. So that's a great one. And happy to share a couple others. I can send some out. But have a look for the stuff that the easiest way is, what are you using right now? What are you using to help your day-to-day in isolation? And those are the companies that are thriving. So check them out. And then from like a new creation of a company perspective, we've seen some really interesting pivots to focus on helping in COVID, which has been awesome. One of our companies in Montreal, it's called Vention. They've prioritized machines that can create PPE and things like that. So there's some great pivots that we're seeing, and some really interesting investments being made.
Great. Devil Lexio, it looks like we answered your question, which was, do you think employers will be more open to remote work as a result of recent events? I think yes. I think long term, we're going to see more openness to this. I think that the openness prior to COVID was somewhat superficial because a lot of companies couldn't build that trust, and we've been forced to build that trust right now. One question here from Twoten again was, how are technical interviews changing now that everyone is remote? Have you seen anything around technical interviews and some of the testing?
I've seen just more focus on leveraging some of the technical assessment tools out there, like HackerRank and things like that. So putting a bit more weighting on those, as opposed to, often those are more of a screening tool. So do you have the basics? Okay, great. Then we'll get you in for the in-person technical side. So making those a bit more challenging and then leveraging them more as a selection tool as opposed to screening. And then the other piece is, and this is one piece of advice that I think is super important from a technical perspective, is actually talking through how you would solve a problem instead of showing them how you solve the problem. So being able to really clearly articulate your approach to something and sort of show your work verbally is becoming critical. When we're on Zoom and I'm saying, okay, here's the open-ended sort of technical problem, as opposed to we would have been in a room at a whiteboard going through it. Now just talk to me and tell me how you would do this. So being able to communicate really concisely your technical skills and your approach is super important.
Nice. And I feel like, I don't know that this is true, but if you are a visual person and you want to be able to live draw something and walk someone through it, don't obviously hesitate to share your screen and take ownership of that, because there's so many tools out there that you can use that everyone knows about. The next question is from Flight Wizard. How do you approach a company that's denied accessible remote work previously, but is now offering remote work? Should you apply?
Interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, there's so many reasons for why people don't believe in remote work. And I love that belief's been turned on its head in pretty much every conceivable scenario at this point. So I would just ask, I would say, how have things changed based on the current state? How are you thinking about it? Most importantly, how is leadership thinking about it? Because that will be the final decision once we get back to some people being able to be in the office. But I would just be really open and ask the question and ask them for transparency around it, because there's certainly a chance that they're remote for the next 3 to 5 months, and then everybody has to be back in the office. So making sure that you get that longer term approach before you make the decision to jump in.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Normally it's funny when someone changes their mind. We all change our minds. This is specifically to this question by Flight Wizard. We all change our minds And I think that some of these companies that were really anti-remote work are being forced in the other direction now. The thing that's really important is that you have to ask whether or not, like, once COVID's over, are they going to go all the way back to just, in office, and that remote work policy will get quite strict again? Or are they starting to see that they'd be willing to hire someone remote full time? Because the last thing you'd want is to agree to one thing and have that change. But there is some forgiveness here, because I also know of, fully in-person companies that are now obviously fully remote and are loving it and feel like they've been proven wrong through this process.
For sure.
What else I think that's the end of the questions we have, and we only have a few minutes left. So I don't know if you have any last thoughts you want to add to the conversation.
I think just the most important thing that I've been talking to everybody about, if it's my team, our founders, any candidates, it's just be human, be more human than you ever have been. It's so important that we feel that connection, and we do that for each other, and just focus on the human elements, and you'll be successful.
Nice. Thank you. The only thing I would add to this, which we didn't talk about today, was where to find jobs right now. There are a few amazing resources out there. Again, I'm going to plug the help list. We're nonprofits, so I get nothing out of it other than helping everyone in this chat, which is at thehelplist.ca. There's a jobs tab at the top, which actually takes you to a page that will link you to Prospect if you want to check out the Prospect job board and see all of the startup jobs. But we've also curated a list of all of the top tech job boards in Canada, and even, beyond Canada, that we think would be relevant sources for those that might be looking for their next gig in the apocalypse. And that's it. I cannot wait to watch. I'm going to watch the Battlesnake tournament this weekend, because my coding skills are laughable, but I'm so excited to be part of this community and to see what everyone is up to. So thank you, Battlesnake team, for having us today.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Marianne. Thanks, Kathryn. That was an awesome session. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for all those insights and those tips. I know I learned something. I'm sure everyone on the chat learned something, and just super thankful for that. And I think it's going to help a lot of people who are looking for their next role right now. Yeah, great. And I'm going to do a little shameless plug as well, as like talking about those side projects, talking about those things that you can do to kind of showcase yourself. Battlesnake is a great side project that you can do a great, show off your programming skills, show off your problem solving, take yourself through your process of how you tackled all these different problems that you're solving with the Battlesnake platform. So just a little shameless plug right there. We've got another workshop coming up in about 5-10 minutes. And so we're going to be joined by 2 senior technical recruiters from RBC who are going to sort of take this conversation beyond just like how to approach the company and how to sort of showcase yourself, to how to build your resume, how to get that resume really showcase worthy and make yourself stand out. So tune back in about 5-10 minutes. We're going to be joined by Sandra and Rehan of RBC, and they're going to sort of walk us through how to update your resume. So see you back in 5 minutes. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye.